The night my brother got engaged, my father looked across the dinner table, raised his champagne glass, and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Finally, one of my kids did something right." He was looking at my brother. He was not looking at me. I had just passed the bar exam 3 weeks earlier. Nobody mentioned it. I remember the way the crystal caught the candlelight. The way my mother smiled at my brother's fiancée like she was already the daughter she always wanted. My aunt reached across the table and squeezed my brother's hand. My uncle made a toast. Someone laughed at something my father said, and I sat there cutting my salmon into smaller and smaller pieces, telling myself it didn't sting. It did. My name is June. I'm 31 years old, and for most of my life I was the quiet one, the serious one. The one who went into public service instead of the family business, who chose a government salary over a corner office, who spent her 20s in a studio apartment eating cold takeout over case files while my brother was handed a 6-figure title and a company card. My father built Alderton Property Group from nothing. He loved telling that story, how he came to Chicago with $200 and a duffel bag, how he scraped and hustled and outworked everyone in the room. It was a good story. He told it at every dinner party, every holiday, every client lunch where I was dragged along as a teenager to pour water and stay quiet. The company was his whole identity, and slowly, without me fully realizing it, it became the thing I was measured against. My brother started working there at 22, right out of undergrad. No MBA, no experience, just the right last name. Within 4 years, he was VP of acquisitions. My father talked about him the way people talk about a sunset, like something beautiful and inevitable. I took a different road, law school, then the Cook County State's Attorney's Office, Financial Crimes Division. Long hours, low pay, and work that actually meant something to me. I prosecuted fraud cases. I helped put away people who stole from pension funds, who laundered money through shell companies, who found every clever legal loophole to take from people who couldn't fight back. My father thought I was wasting my potential. "You could be doing real law," he used to say. Corporate, transactional, something that builds wealth instead of chasing it. I stopped trying to explain myself around year 3. The engagement party was held at my parents' house in Naperville. The big colonial with the circular driveway my father bought in 2009 as what he called a statement of intent. 40 people, catered, string lights in the backyard. My brother's fiancée, Tatum, was warm and funny and completely unaware of the family she was marrying into. I liked her. I felt sorry for her in advance. I arrived alone. I always arrived alone to these things. My mother hugged me at the door and immediately asked if I'd done something different with my hair. That was her version of hello. My aunt pulled me aside to ask if I was seeing anyone, and when I said no, she made a face that I've spent 31 years learning to ignore. My father shook my hand. Not a hug, a handshake. Like I was a colleague he was vaguely familiar with. "June." That's all he said. I found a spot near the drinks table and stayed there most of the night. The toast happened around 9. My father stood at the head of the patio and everyone gathered. He talked about family, about legacy, about what it means to build something that outlasts you. His voice got thick the way it always did when he was performing sentiment for an audience. And then he said it. Finally, one of my kids did something right. Laughter. Warmth. My brother put his arm around Tatum and grinned. I looked down at my glass. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known yet, was that 3 days later, my phone would ring with a case number that would change everything. It started with a tip. In financial crimes, most things do. Someone on the inside gets SIRS or angry, or their conscience catches up to them, and they make a call. The tip that came across my desk in mid-October was about a property development company out of the northwest suburbs. Shell entities, inflated appraisals, fraudulent loan applications submitted to 2 different federally insured banks. Standard playbook, sloppy execution. The company's registered agent was listed as Alderton Capital Holdings, LLC. I stared at that name for a long time. Then I passed it to my supervisor and asked to be recused. She looked at me over her glasses. "You sure?" "It's my father's company," I said. "Or something adjacent to it. I can't touch it." She nodded. Assigned it to another attorney in our division, a sharp and thorough man named Reeves, who I trusted completely. I went back to my other cases and told myself it wasn't my problem. But things have a way of finding you. 2 weeks later, Reeves knocked on my office doorframe. He didn't come in. He just stood there with a look I recognized. The look of someone who knows they're about to hand you something you don't want. "I need to ask you something," he said. "And you can tell me it's none of my business. Go ahead." "Did you know your name is on some of these entities?" The room went very still. My name, my full legal name, Juniper Claire Alderton, listed as a member of 3 separate LLCs that I had never heard of, never signed documents for, never agreed to in any form. Entities that had been used to move money between accounts, to inflate the value of properties that were then collateral for bank loans, to create the illusion of arm's length transactions that weren't arm's length at all. Someone had used my identity to commit fraud, and I had a very short list of people who had access to everything they'd need to do it. I went home that night and sat in my car in my building's parking garage for 45 minutes. I didn't cry. I'm not really a crier. I just sat there with my hands in my lap and thought about every time my father had asked me to sign something for family tax purposes. Every time he'd said he needed my social security number for estate planning. Every form I'd filled out at his kitchen table while my mother poured sweet tea and the TV murmured in the background. I had signed things. I had given him information. I had trusted him because he was my father, and it hadn't occurred to me, not once, not for a single second, that he would use me. The case didn't belong to me, but the evidence did, in a sense, because my name was on the documents. I was technically a subject of the investigation, which meant I had the right to review the materials that implicated me. I worked with Reeves carefully, transparently, with our supervisor in the loop at every step. I wasn't investigating my father. I was clearing my own name. Those are different things. They look similar from the outside. I know that. What I found working through those documents over the following 6 weeks was methodical and deliberate and breathtakingly thorough. My father hadn't made a mistake in a moment of desperation. He had built this slowly, over years, layering entity over entity, moving small amounts at a time, keeping everything just below the thresholds that trigger automatic review. He was good at it. My brother's fingerprints were there too, not as an architect, but as a participant. Emails, approval signatures, a paper trail that suggested he understood exactly what he was signing, even if he'd convinced himself it was just how business works. I found a wire transfer, dated 2 weeks before the engagement party, moving $400,000 through one of the entities with my name on it. 4 days after that transfer, my father gave a toast about legacy. I thought about that a lot. The holidays were coming. My family had a tradition. Christmas Eve at my parents' house, everyone gathered. My mother's standing rib roast. A fire in the fireplace. It was, on the surface, a beautiful tradition. Underneath it was years of loaded silences and careful topics, and the performance of a family that had long since stopped being one. I went. I brought wine. I hugged my mother. I watched my brother and Tatum sit together on the couch and look genuinely happy. And I felt the specific grief of knowing that what was coming was going to shatter that too, and that it wasn't my fault, and that wouldn't make it easier. My father poured bourbon and settled into his chair and told the story again. $200, a duffel bag, outworking everyone in the room. I smiled at the right moments. I left early, said I had work in the morning. My father walked me to the door. In the entryway, with the coats and the smell of pine from the wreath my mother hung every year, he looked at me, and for a moment his face did something complicated, something almost like regret. You should come around more, he said. I know, I said. You work too hard. I looked at him. My father, who had built something from nothing, who had taught me to work hard, who had stood at a party in front of 40 people and told them his son was the one who got it right. My father, who had borrowed my name and my identity and my clean record and used them like raw materials. I learned from the best, I said. He smiled. He thought I meant it as a compliment. I drove home in the dark and called Reeves from the highway. It's ready, I said. I know, he said. The U.S. Attorney's Office called this afternoon. They want to move forward. The arrest happened on a Tuesday morning in February, which is, in my experience, when most things in the federal system happen. No drama, no warning. 2 agents showed up at Alderton Property Group's River North office at 9 a.m. and served my father with a grand jury subpoena. My brother, at a site visit in Evanston, received his 40 minutes later. I wasn't there, I was at my desk. My supervisor brought me a coffee and didn't say anything. She didn't have to. My phone started ringing around 11, my mother first, then my aunt, then a cousin I hadn't spoken to in 3 years. I let them all go to voicemail. My brother called at noon. I picked up. Did you know about this? His voice was controlled in the way that meant he was barely controlling it. I found out when I recused myself from the case, I said. 6 months ago. Silence. 6 months? Yes. And you didn't say anything. I thought about how to answer that. I thought about the engagement party and the toast and the entity with my name on it that moved $400,000 while my father talked about legacy. The case wasn't mine to say anything about, I said. I removed myself from it. It was handled by someone else through the appropriate channels. That's how it's supposed to work. You're my sister. I know you could have warned us. And there it was. The thing I had been waiting for, the reframing I knew was coming. Not we shouldn't have done this, but you should have protected us from the consequences. You could have not done it, I said. That was also an option. He hung up. My mother called again at 2. This time I answered. She was crying, which I had expected. She said she didn't understand, which I had also expected. She said my father would never do something like this, which told me she either didn't know or had decided not to know, and I wasn't sure which was worse. Mom, I said, they used my name, my identity, without asking me, without telling me, without my consent. They put me on documents for companies I've never heard of. I could have been charged. Silence. I didn't know that, she said quietly. I know you didn't. Does it matter? That I didn't know? I looked out my office window at the gray February sky over Chicago. It matters, I said. It doesn't change what happened, but it matters. The federal case moved slowly, the way federal cases do. My father hired an attorney, a very expensive one, which he could afford because, unlike the LLCs with my name on them, his personal assets had been carefully kept separate. My brother hired his own attorney. There were motions and counter-motions and delays and the long grinding machinery of the system that I knew me from the inside and had spent years believing in, even when it was frustrating. I cleared my name completely within 2 months. Documented, official, on the record. Juniper Claire Alderton was an unwitting victim of identity misuse. I had not participated in, consented to, or benefited from any of the transactions attached to those entities. I framed the letter from the U.S. Attorney's Office. I'm not ashamed of that. What came next surprised me in a way I hadn't let myself anticipate. Tatum called. She and I had spoken maybe 6 times in our lives politely at family gatherings. She called from a number I didn't have saved, and when I answered, she said, "It's Tatum." "Your brothers. I'm Tatum," and then stopped, like she didn't know what to call herself anymore. "I know who you are," I said. "Are you okay?" She wasn't okay. She had found out the same way I had. Not from my brother directly, but from a federal subpoena delivered to her dining room table, addressed to her fiancé. She had called off the engagement the same week. We talked for 2 hours. I didn't know her well. By the end of that call, I liked her enormously. She asked me, toward the end, why I hadn't warned anyone. I thought about it seriously before I answered. Because it wasn't mine to tell, I said. And because, and this is harder to say, I don't think it would have changed anything. My father built something over years. My brother was inside it. If I'd said, I think there's something wrong with what you're doing, they would have found a way to explain it to me, or dismiss me, or both. That's what they always did. I paused. The only thing I could actually do was make sure I wasn't part of it, and then stay out of the way. She was quiet for a moment. That must have been lonely, she said. I hadn't expected that. Something tightened in my chest. Yeah, I said. It was. The case is still pending as I tell you this. Federal cases don't resolve quickly, and I've made peace with that. My father has pled not guilty. The evidence suggests that won't hold. My brother is cooperating with prosecutors, which is the smart move. Though I doubt he thinks of it that way, he probably thinks of it as surviving. My mother and I have dinner once a month. It's careful and quiet, and we don't talk about the case. We talk about her garden and the neighbors and a podcast she's been listening to. It's not what I want, but it's what's possible right now, and I've learned to tell the difference. My father hasn't called. I told myself I wasn't waiting for it. I'm still telling myself that. What I didn't expect, what nobody thinks about when they imagine scenarios like this, is how good it felt to do things right. Not the outcome, not the justice or the vindication or whatever word people use for the feeling you get when the truth finally lands where it should. I mean the actual doing. The 6 months of working within the system I believed in, of refusing to tip off someone I loved, of holding the line between what I wanted to do and what was right to do because they were different, and I knew it. That's what I'm proud of. Not that my father got caught, that I didn't become someone who would protect him anyway. There's a distinction there that I think about a lot. My law school professor used to say that integrity is what you do when nobody's watching and nothing's at stake. I used to think that was a comforting idea, but a limited one. I think now that the harder version is this. Integrity is what you do when everything is at stake, when someone you love is on the other side of the line, when protecting yourself means not protecting them. That's the version that costs something. The engagement party feels like a different lifetime. My father's voice, bright and loud over champagne. Finally, one of my kids did something right. The way I looked down at my glass, the way the salmon went cold. I'm back in my office now. Different case files. Same cold takeout. The Chicago skyline out my window at 10 p.m. All lit up and indifferent and exactly where I left it. I built my life without my father's approval. I built it on government salary and long hours, and work that meant something. Work that held a line between what was right and what was easy. I didn't do it to prove a point. I did it because it was what I actually believed in, what I still believe in, even when it cost me more than I thought I was paying. He called me the daughter who didn't get it right. I'm the daughter who knew, the whole time, exactly what right looked like. I just had to wait for everyone else to catch up.